morning, it's Jenny Pell, the Growers Podcast. I'm here with Iginia Boccalandro, who's visiting us from Colorado to talk about her worker-owned co-op, where they're growing very unique strains of low THC CBD cannabis. And we're going to learn all about her project and also her work with the Carbon Economy series. It's really great to have you here today, Iginia.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Iginia is an old permaculture colleague and friend of mine. I think we met decades ago, at least 20 years ago, at the Women's Permaculture Conference in Convergence, which was just an incredible convening of women, mostly from around North America, to share their projects and their work. In the intervening 20 years, the women's movement in permaculture has been nothing short of astounding. And I put Iginia firmly in that category. So Iginia is going to tell us today a little bit about her projects. So Iginia, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I feel honored to be speaking with you. You've actually always been a person that's in a position of mentor, and I've been watching closely all the different food forests and the solutions you've made for people seeking greater sustainability and a way of living on Earth. And so thank you. I'm honored to be here. And I come from Venezuela. I'm a tropical girl. Things move fast, and you have to do the best you can. It's a very different relationship than with the desert in terms of how you deal with growing things and whatnot. And it wasn't, I mean, as a kid, both of my parents are civil engineers, so I wanted to know everything about construction and mechanics, and engineers are using their intelligence to solve problems. So for me, I am the little girl that always turned the rock over to see what was there. And I've been doing that my entire life. And when I bumped into permaculture design and read the book that Holmgren and Bill Mollison, the whole thing, I read it the cover, and I was sure that I was missed the boat. This was like in 2000, and no, in 1998, I was sure that I didn't know anything about permaculture, and I was way behind. And so I had to take courses, and I just went through the best teachers, in grazing and holistic land management. And I remembered that as a kid, my background is my grandfather is a rancher and raised cattle and also had like cotton. And in the summer I would go horseback, and we'd change the animals through a grazed management system, which I didn't understand until I met Alan Savory. And I remember as a 10-year-old moving these electrical wires so that then we could have the cattle go from one place to another, and then change them every 30 days. By the end of the 30 days, the pasture had come back. And my father was an MIT, Harvard graduate. He was on the cutting edge. All the campesinos in Caracas thought he was nuts with the electrical. And I mean, to watch a huge Cebu bull, they're the ones that have like a bump in the back because it's good for arid. In Venezuela, we have dry season and wet season. So, it's kind of, you need hardy animals to watch 1,200 pounds or 2,500 pounds stuck with a little wire like this, because we would train them how to go through there so that they would understand that it would hurt them. And so my twin sister and I would go, and we thought we could drop the wire and they would step over it. All those big animals just waiting. And so we would raise it, then they would walk under it. And that was one of our jobs. And I actually had no idea that I was doing planned grazing from Alan Savory's work with holistic management until I studied it with Kurt DeGazia in Mexico. But the truth of the matter is, we've been here for 100,000 years. We've been here for a long time. And in the last 100, we have changed the way we do everything. And so that's having an impact. Literally, we have been here for hundreds of thousands of years. And what you see is wherever there's civilization, we create deserts. We cut everything down. The soil erodes, everything disappears. The only difference between, like when you read the Old Testament, what's it saying? It's saying, the hanging gardens of Babylon, the cedars of Lebanon. I mean, it's like we have not seen cedars or hanging things for for hundreds of years, if not 1,000 years. So literally, where humans are, we create deserts and erosion, and it's a problem. The only difference between the United States and Egypt is that it took them thousands of years, and we literally did it in like 60 years. We created this huge bald spot in the United States, which is
Right. Okay, so, and well, let's just take that for a second. So, like the famous gigantic cedars of Lebanon, they cut them all down to smelt the ore to make weapons. To in the Crusades, or it's like all of Ireland used to be forested, and they cut that down all to melt the metals to make weapons. Looking at the pattern of destruction and deforestation across the globe, it comes from a combination of resource mismanagement, right, and weaponry, right? There's those two things in concert. When the original colonists came over from Europe over to the New World, there would just be swirling yellow foam on top of the ocean that was the pollen from the trees, from the East Coast trees, and they just came down and wholesale, cut the trees down. And they had 100 different words for creek, river, bog, fen, marsh. Everybody had wet feet. Their feet were all rotting because everything was so wet in the landscape in the East Coast and on the eastern seaboard. And now, of course, that whole pattern has been not just interrupted, it's just gone.
exactly. And, in the entire food web underneath the soil that kept everything going, and I studied with Gotti, who created Las Gaviotas in Colombia, a sustainable village. It's been there for 50, 60 years now. Basically, he like grabbed a pickup truck and he used half a tank to get as far away from Bogota towards the east, towards Venezuela, and then so that he could get a half a tank back. And so he created this sustainable village. And when he speaks, he says, the trees, all the vegetation on our planet, it's like a skin of the planet, and it's what keeps us alive. It's that all those biological forces of photosynthesis and all the microbes and fungi and nematodes that are underneath our feet are what keep us alive, And he says, when you chop down the skin of the earth, you are killing us. And that is why, like in 1990, I thought, the air is the most important thing. The carbon, the amount of carbon, the way that, those proportions are so exact. And if we shift them, then something's going to change. So in 1990, I thought, oh, I'm late to the party. I need to tell this to everybody. And nobody would even listen. The word sustainability didn't exist. And I had been studying with Larry Santoyo in Los Angeles, and he said, look, you did a permaculture design for a school, for a summer camp. Where are these kids going to go? It's like in college, there's nothing like that. And so then my project began as, how do we put sustainability in college campuses? And we taught 31 and 2-day workshops in New Mexico and Dallas in 10 different colleges. And lo and behold, now, 15, 20 years later, the word sustainability is a career path. It is something that people can study. And so I felt, well, that's, a big enough impact for me. I had my profession. I have only one profession, and everything else you talk about are hobbies that I do, but my one profession is I'm a body worker. I do a technique called rolfing. And I was impacting 100 people a year. I thought that's too small. So I created the economy series, and that was like 3,000 people a year, and I was happy. And then right in Santa Fe, I'm creating the sustainability workshops, and I go to it's a farmer's market that's considered one of the most successful in the United States. It's beautiful. It's got a lot of vendors. They have high quality organic products. And I asked them, what's your income? And they had the average agriculture producer in New Mexico makes $6,000 of revenue a year. And I'm like, how do you survive? Well, they trade between each other and they eat well, but their kids are not going to go to college. They're not going to be able to pay for that. So my thought was, what can we do? What kind of crop can we give farmers that will create an extra $100,000 a year? Because that was in CSU, they did a study and they realized that the average farmer in the United States is 65 or older and they're single. They've lost their spouse. They told their kids, get out of here, go study something else. You do not want to be a slave of this land the way it is. And so, what would it take to bring one of those kids back and give them a legacy plan? And it's the number was $100,000. So I meet Bill Althouse, who he takes up farming, energy engineer, but he's a farmer because challenging thing he's ever done, and he's a genius. And it takes him all this time and effort to grow strawberries. Somebody bet him you can't grow strawberries in New Mexico because it's too dry, it's too high, it's too desert, it's too windy. And so he did 10 years in a row where every other year the crop would fail until he figured it out. And he had these strawberries, which were from Europe, really, really sweet. And the reason why nobody grows them here is because so sweet that all the bugs like them. And so, you get a Driscoll strawberry that doesn't taste like anything. The bugs don't attack it. But these are just outrageous. And I kept thinking he should be able to make a living off of that. So when I took over the farm with my volunteers, we put the price up. He was selling a pint per 5. I said it's a pint per 8. And we still couldn't make ends meet. So I said, we need another crop. And he had been growing the strawberries. This dispensary had just gotten the license and said, can you grow anything else? He goes, well, I try. And he goes, why don't you become our master grower? And he said, I'm not interested in growing pot for stoners. Done that, been there, not interested. What I want to work with is CBD because it's got a healing capacity. And so they were like, well, what's CBD? And he's like, well, it's like pot, but it doesn't get you high and it's good for you. And everybody was like, oh, that's so stupid. But anyway, he said, I'm going to be your master grower if you let me do a case study. So he did the case study with the first variety discovered in the United States with CBD called Harlequin, and it was 6% THC, 6% CBD. So it was a marijuana plant that had CBD in it. And so he did these case studies and it just transformed his life. He said he'd bring it to a veteran who suffered from PTSD and his wife would say, he's loaded his gun, he's talking about suicide, come over here. Oh, and he had to deliver because people couldn't just go and buy it. This is a while back. And so he would deliver it. The guy had the gun loaded. He'd smoke a little bit of the CBD. And 20 minutes later, he was out in the front yard playing with his kid. He unloaded the gun and everything. He'd go, wow, this is miraculous. People that were really ill, he'd see all their dishes and weeds and laundry all backed up. And then, 3 weeks into it, they were getting back. And so he became really inspired about that and was looking for a variety that was really low in THC. Because if you prohibit something, right, from hemp was in 3080 legal, the word marijuana was invented because they said it came from the South and Mary and Juana, that's from, and so they had prohibited it. So the only people that grew, it was to get high. And so there's over 120 cannabinoids. If you make the THC higher and higher and higher, it displaces all the others. So basically all the genetics are THC dominant, and the other 123 cannabinoids are not even there. Well, we found one. It was cherry, and it was supposed to stay below the 0.3%. And we had somebody gave us that plant, we grew it, and then we had 1,000 pounds and it went over. It was 0.7%. So I was thinking I was going to help somebody with medicine. And then we realized, kingpin, you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life. You have 1,000 pounds. It's not like
Right.
5 plants. It was 10,000 plants. So then we were like, well, what are we going to do? So we decided to mix it with coconut oil. And, Charlotte's Web was right there. We were like just getting these innovations. How do you dilute it so that it's that way? And then the second year, we realized the variety we had named Cherry went over. We can't give this to a farmer. They'll lose their farm. So we did what we call genomic selection. Genomic selection is crazy because we had 6,000 seeds and we popped the 6,000 seeds. Half of them were male, so there was only 1,000. And then out of those 3,000, 1,500 died because of whatever. They didn't root, So we ended up with no production for the second year, but we took those 1,500 plants through the full season. And it was beautiful. You could just see all the different varieties, even though there were the seeds of the same mom, but with unknown fathers. And we found one variety that stayed below the 0.3 and had CBD, and we called it unicorn. And we realized, wow, the genetic probabilities to get a high CBD crop is virtually impossible. And what people were doing is the genetics of cherry were stolen, and people just said, cut early. Just don't take it to full season. But you grow things. If I tell you, pick your tomato when it's this big instead of when it's this big, you're gonna go, why? It's like you gotta wait until it matures. Well,
So I have a question there. So how did you fund your several years of genetic study and genetic selection?
wow, that's a great question. In the beginning, we didn't have a lot of, so we organized ourselves as a worker co-op, and we said, okay, you put in your sweat equity, and that's your investment into the business. So basically, Bill, Yami, and I, there's 3 members. Bill's been working for like 12 years. I've been working for like 9, and Yami for like 7. We've never really gotten a paycheck. We just get all our expenses paid for, and we have enough material to sell like $3 million worth. Now we're concentrating on the marketing of that, because now we've got it down pat, and we never really been paid. So as a worker cooperative, you as a member get part of the profit, but we haven't really made profit. We've just stayed alive. In the first 3 years, we didn't have a lot of capital, so we would exchange CBD. So people would come, we'd give them CBD, and they would help us harvest, plant, transplant. And so it really became a community project where the first 2 years we gave away more CBD than we sold, but it created such goodwill in our community, because the truth of the matter is we donate 10% of our production to people that can't afford it. The truth is, though, that whoever asks me for it, I give it to them, because if they need it, then I'm going to give it to them. And so it created such goodwill that whenever we asked for true believers, which were people who would give us a loan that was not backed up by anything except the fact that we were going to do this crop. So our first technology was to buy a distiller. It was a whiskey still that we retrofitted to be able to extract essential oil. It was $80,000. So we had a friend, may he rest in peace, called John Long, who knew everybody and was this incredibly generous guy. And I said, we need $75,000. And he's like, okay. And the next day he came back with $50,000. And we paid them a 50% return. So they gave us $25,000 and we gave them back 37,500. And we did that in a year. So all those true believers who gave us those unsecured loans, we said, if we can't pay you, we have it in CBD and we'll give it to you. And they said, okay. Well, the next time we needed anything, they were like, do you want more money? Would you like more money? I mean, we paid them so well that they were happy to help us.
So you spent as much time as you needed isolating the strain that you wanted. Now you focus on these very, very low THC varieties, and you have a CBD market, and your co-op has, you have your membership, and now of course, it's legal in Colorado, right? And so you have your own dispensaries. Are you selling to the dispensaries, or who's your main market at this point?
It's been mostly friends and family. We didn't go online until 2 years ago. So, and we don't really sell to dispensaries. They do their own stuff. Now we're just slowly going into social media, so we're getting more and more people. The unfortunate thing about our industry is that the people who got involved were just in it for the money, so they didn't do things for quality. They didn't take care of the customers. They overproduced, so the price in the wholesale market dropped, and it's like 95% of all the companies that were around in 2016, 17, and 18 are gone, because the retail market was slowly growing, and it's still growing, but people don't know a lot about it. I mean, most people think, oh, it's pot, you're trying to get me high, I don't like that. It's like there's a huge stigma to cannabis still.
Yep. But as the industry matures and as the medicinal end of it starts to grow apace, the work that you're doing is really important. And so, do you sell seeds? Do you sell your product online? Where can people find your product? Where, if I want to buy from your co-op, where would I go?
We have a webpage. It's called fatpigsociety.com, and you can find all our products. You can do, I mean, we have several possibilities. Now, our unicorn, it's now in cell culture at CSU, and as a university anywhere in the world you can import those genetics, and you would sign an agreement with us on being able to propagate it wherever you are and giving us a small royalty for each plant. And it's the first AOSCA certified, which is the American Association of Seeds, variety of cannabis ever registered. It's the first one. We only go through clones because the seeds have not been stabilized. So essentially it takes 6 to 7 years to stabilize a seed by backbreeding it with itself. Well, that hasn't happened for anybody in the cannabis. So when somebody is selling you a seed and telling you it's this and it's that, they're lying. It would be like if you have 100 kids, the only kids that would be identical would be twins or triplets, but you would have all that genetic variation. And so we have one plant that's been registered in AOSCA, and it's the only one CBD. There are ones registered for seed, for fiber, for dual crops, but not really for CBD. So we sell the clones as well.
So if I were a client that wanted to buy the clones, I'd be looking at getting it's like a graft. It's like a scion wood. It's like the cannabis version of that. So you get your clone, and then I would be interested in having that clone so that I could also move it into a medicinal, low THC, CBD, products.
Yeah, no, totally. We believe it works if you're varied. So if you're if you're just gonna grow for the flower to sell it to somebody else, you're not gonna make enough money. But if you grow and then you harvest and then you cure and you dry and you extract and you have a finished product, you're vertically integrated, then on 1 or 2 acres you can make $100,000. It's like we've already proven it. In fact, we had to create the Fat Pig Society because we went to 110 farmers in Colorado and said, hey, we've got this CBD, it's not marijuana, and they all said, go away, we don't want to do anything with you. And so basically, like, where are you from? You're not from here. And most farmers are that way. You go and you say, I've got this innovation, and they're like, where are you from? Here it doesn't rain as much, or it rains too much, or it's too dry. They always have a story, and you're a newcomer, and nobody wanted to grow anything with us. And so we created the Fat Pig Society it's a proof of concept, that we in 2 acres grew enough product to be able to sell, at the best year we sold $750,000 worth of product. It cost us $750,000 to do it. But it was like, so we learned, and COVID saved us, really. I mean, because we were spending much money in the extraction and we weren't making any money. But when COVID hit, things shut down, we looked at all the numbers. We were like, holy crap, we're spending the same amount of money. And so time had gone through. We've been USDA organic the whole time, which means the land or your method has to be organic. The way you dry it has to be organic. The way you extract it has to be organic. And your kitchen has to be certified organic. So it's like all these steps, right? We were looking for an extractor. There weren't any extractors, and none of them were organic. When as soon as COVID hit, then we looked again, and there were 6 organic extractors in Colorado. And one of them, the only one, was a farmer. And Bill had talked to him early on. He goes, where the bottleneck is going to be in the distillation and the extraction. Why don't you do that? And up until then, all the extractors were telling the farmers, you don't have to pay me. Just give me 50% of your product. Well, 50% of the product is like $200,000, it's like, and so they were just stringing farmers along, and we didn't want to play with those guys. So this guy, it's called NOCO Extraction, and I'll give a kudos and a thumbs up to them. It's like they are charging $5 a pound for extraction, not, $50 a pound. So, and actually the thing that's the saddest is I've watched their state have the same scrupulous human beings sell genetics, bad extraction, and they've gone from one state to another doing the same thing. So, yeah, I feel bad for anybody that hasn't had the battles like we have in Colorado, but you're going to end up having the same battles. And what you have to know is there is no stabilized seed that guarantees you being below the 0.3. And the extraction with hexane and butane, which might be really cheap, is toxic and poisonous. That hemp is a bioremediator because it's a weed, so it has the ability to suck up impurities from the soil. So if your soil is not organic, then you're going to be mixing your medicine with a toxin, which the pharmaceutical doesn't care about that. I mean, a pill will have 2% of an active ingredient, and everything else are petroleum products that are fillers and binders. But we in the natural foods world, we in the world of real food, and you're talking reality, climate reality, like the reality is that when you grow food or any medicine inside of soil which is filled with fertility and microbes and fungi and all of that, then that food is filled with those nutrients. And that's why we are so particular, because we want the medicine to not be messed up.
Right. Well, I have a couple more questions about your unicorn strain, and then I want to switch back over into the carbon economy series and talk a little bit more about the climate change stuff too, because I think as farmers and industries are recognizing the profit potential in the cannabis world, we want to figure out how to also look at carbon sequestration equations, and we also want to look at, like, one of the things that's being talked about in Hawaii is if you're going to have a cannabis grow, then 60% can be cannabis and 40% should be in food. So so it's not, so because we really need to localize our food economies in the climate change era. And so where are you now? So you have your unicorn strain, that's your big seller, right? Are you guys seeking other strains? Are you just going to focus on marketing that? We were also talking to another person recently who's working in Colombia, and they're changed their constitution to legalize cannabis for recreation, for medicine, for tourism, for everything. And the farmers down there probably could benefit from some consulting from Iginia Boccalandro.
I was invited to Uruguay to speak in their cannabis conference, and they wanted to know more about CBD. And while I met these women that were Dutch, and they told me that Uruguay had done the same thing that the Dutch had done and that the United States had done, which is they legalized the use of it, but the transportation of it and the growing of it and the selling of it is not legal. So here you are, the consumer can get it, but how do you get it to the consumer without breaking the law? And it's crazy. Well, the United States has exactly the same thing. I mean, Colorado did not legalize marijuana. What they did was heavily regulate it and sell it to the highest bidder. Because if it was legal to grow marijuana in Colorado, you could grow it and sell it as a lemonade stand. Well, they're not allowing you to do that. They put all these regulations, and each state is doing exactly the same thing. So now Oregon, California, Colorado, they're growing more than 100 times what they can consume in the state. So know that it's exported and done everything without following any of the laws. So it wasn't legalized. It was heavily regulated and sold to the highest bidders. The first 150 permits of marijuana went to Las Vegas and Russian cartels, to Wall Street, to the tobacco companies, to even petroleum companies. And so you get people like that. And this has been a sacred plant for thousands of years. I mean, it's like you see that man in the Alps who was found frozen. He had a little pouch with seeds of cannabis because it's very useful to us. And so I'm thinking, even since we haven't had it as a regular thing for more than 80 years, that maybe some of the health problems that we're having is because we used to be surrounded by cannabis in terms of food, medicine, the textile industry, and we haven't had it. And maybe that endocannabinoid system, which it's endocannabinoids inside our bodies, it has receptors for those cannabinoids. If that isn't working, maybe our our health is deteriorating, or we don't have the same immune system.
So why do humans have all of those cannabinoid receptors in their brain and their body if you didn't co-evolve with the plant? It doesn't make any sense. Clearly humans and cannabis have been together for a very long time. The at this juncture of looking at hemp and cannabis and medicine again, we're finding what we're trying to do through Growers Magazine is we're seeking out people who are doing what we call pono cannabis. They're doing cannabis the right way. They're looking for the organic methods. The people that are doing the big indoor grows that use stunning amounts of chemicals in their cannabis grows, it's just terrible. And even the outdoor grows, everything has its benefits and its limitations. And so while this big experimental phase is going on, I really applaud you guys for sticking to your principles and doing it as a co-op, and trying to support the small farmer. And small farmers, they have a hard go of it. It's really challenging to make it as a row crop farmer. If anything should be subsidized from the farm bill, it should be the small organic farmer. And it's insane to me that the subsidies continue to go to giant agrochemical business. The ChemAg business is, they got the farm bill locked down. So here we are at this, the very early stages of the cannabis industry finding its organic footing. And I'm just a couple more questions on that end, which is, what are your plans? Like, where do you want to take your co-op from here?
We want to teach people to do what we did. We have 6 or 7 innovations that we figured out through stumbling and then realizing, oh, look at this. It was like every time that a door shut in our faces and we took a different direction, that helped us. So we'd love to teach. We have a program where 3 or 4 people come during the season and they learn all the things that we do. I'd like to figure out how to do something like what you're doing. It's like an online video, and maybe, people come for 2 days as, part of the end of the workshop or something. But I do think that, number one, we want to teach. Number 2, we want to start working with hemp in the energy. So finally, Bill Althouse, who's a genius, was able to convince the people that energy and agriculture can go together, because if you're using a digester, it's just, we want to do, like, for example, decorticate. So in hemp, if you're using fiber, right, you have to separate the fiber from the wood. And what sticks it together is the lignin, and lignin is sticky. That's why, and it has a lot of it. Cannabis is really sticky. So forever, the problem has been the lignin, and how do you get rid of the lignin? So in 1936, they came out with a decorticator, which was mechanical. In the past, they would put it like this at the end of the season, and then leave it there in the winter, and then the fungi would eat away at the lignin. Then you could pull the fiber. But then it had this fungus in it, and people didn't want the fungus in the fiber, so they decided to crush it. And they crush it, and then they make the thread by winding it together, and it's very, very coarse. It's like very, very coarse. And so the only way you can get a t-shirt is to mix it with cotton. It's not very good. The Chinese are way ahead of us. So what we're looking at is, if you have a long fiber like silk or linen, or then it's a very, very soft fiber. Well, how do you do that? So we got $160,000 grant to study that
From who? Who did you get the grant from?
The Colorado Department of Agriculture.
Okay, so I'm just going to say that again. So the Colorado Department of Agriculture gave you a $160,000 grant to study and innovate on the lignin component of the decortication of the stalk of the hemp plants.
That is actually, we wish they would have done that. They didn't quite go that far.
Okay.
But what we said was, if you decorticate, right, with an inoculant of whatever, fungus, enzymes, inside of a silage bag, then the farmer owns everything. So typically the way that it's been is the farmer grows it, and then there is a big decorticator plant. If you're more than 50 miles away, the distance and the weight doesn't make it worth your while. And then the farmer shows up, and then they go, well, we're going to give you $500 a ton because of whatever. So if the
Okay.
farmer has the long fiber, they make $500 a ton, not 50. And the way that we want them to do it is, so our experiment is plant it at different densities, cut it at different lengths, and then put it in the silage bag with 16 different inoculants. So we have 16 fields, and then the inoculants, and then at the end we open up the silage bags and see which one works better. So CSU is all in to create the inoculants.
Okay, so CSU, so they helping you with the data analysis of all of the stages of this experiment?
Yes, because we have so many departments. You have the microbiologists that are creating the inoculants, and then inside of the silage bag, you're creating methane. So we're going to grab the methane to power the plant, to power the farm. And
Okay.
then once we find the right inoculant, then you're ready to roll. Well, guess what? The two usually you have the byproduct woody hull, and then you have the fiber, and then the lignin, which everybody tried to get rid of. Well, Bill, if you put lignin first in Google, you will get an entire realm of chemistry that has realized that the lignin in the cannabis plant is almost identical to diesel. Like it can become three, which is what the guys in Nazi Germany used for instead of diesel. It's very, very close. Yes, it's going to take some chemical something or other, but imagine if the lignin became the highest priced thing because you could substitute petroleum, and then the fiber and the woody, which the wood you could create pellets and have a biomass. Then it would make perfect sense for the greediest people in the world to get into sustainable farming.
Oh, they're just gonna patent it and steal it. One thing that reminds me, I mean, 20 years ago, the Japanese were working on a reduced lignin tree, and they wanted it in the pulp industry, right? So that was what they were up to. And I remember at the time being sort of mortified at the genetic engineering of trees to have no lignin because, of course, they're going to cross pollinate with other trees. That was my concern at the time. But I wonder if there's also an angle here of like a reduced lignin strain, and then there's lots of work that's been done on that in trees.
I'll put Bill on it because he loves to read things in the middle of the night. So I'll put him on it.
So
And,
yeah,
and I actually thought I came up with an idea, and it turns out that the Japanese are doing it, which was, like if you want to eat an alfalfa sprout, right, you can eat it like that. If you wait until it's an alfalfa plant, you can't eat it like that. So I was like, why don't we just cut early? And that's exactly what they're doing.
I know we could probably go ramble on a long time about what's going on in the cannabis industry. Maybe we can have a few minutes conversation about carbon sequestration and carbon credits if you're growing acreages of hemp.
Well, actually, the bill that was passed with this administration has billions of dollars for climate studies, and basically what they want is they don't want anybody to study anything else. They just want people to implement and do the projects, which I think that it's and the credits are huge. The credits are huge. I mean, it's the first time that the people who are the greediest on the planet are now, let's do renewable because look at the credits that you can get from it. So it's really happening. We on another level, the Carbon Economy series is very, very focused on this right now in Fort Collins. We have a muni grid. Our city, we own our own ability to get energy from the sun and reduce our costs. Now, almost every other city in the United States, it's private. The privatization of energy is, you're at their mercy. So what Bill and the carbon,
Right. Well, and they're beholden to their shareholders rather than to their public utility that they're should be beholden in a different direction.
What's happening right now is that Fort Collins has been patting themselves on the back. We're 100% renewable. And Bill Althouse said, why don't we be 300% renewable and sell our renewable energy to Longmont, Boulder, and Golden because they want to be renewable. And it took him 6 months to even be able to talk to anybody that would say, what a great idea. Well, now they're getting it. And forever, Jenny, as you and I know, what they say about renewable energy is, oh, well, how do you balance out the grid when the sun isn't shining or when there's no wind or when there's that? Because of the storage is what's been really bizarre and hard. Well, guess what? Bill demonstrated that there's more than 6,000 vehicles that are electric vehicles, and those electric vehicles can get the charge. So it's like, if you have an electric vehicle, instead of just being a consumer, you become what's called a prosumer. You're also creating electricity with panels. So you get the energy at the no peak at 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And then when the grid needs it, then you sell it for 20 cents. Well, guess what? And the solar industry in the United States is telling people, we'll put the solar panels there. We own the solar panels. We reduce your bill, and then we get those credits and we get that extra and sell it. Well, what we're saying is that each person becomes a prosumer. We're also energy, and we get it at 6 cents, and then when the grid needs it, we plug it back in. Well, guess all the electric cars are now going to have those two-way connection. It's already being used in Europe extensively, and you and I could be making money with our electric batteries.
So the irony of that is our solar went in, right? And Hawaii has a mandate to get to, carbon neutral, and we have a 2050 mandate, and they're way behind the curve. And so Costco, Sunrun, these different companies, they go door to door, and they're trying to get you to go solar with a really affordable monthly payment. That if you have everything on electric, you charge your stuff during the day, not at peak hours. But their buyback is a pittance, right? So it's a pittance, and you have to sign a contract that you're going to do a buyback at that level. So let me see if I understand this. So your battery in your car, once it's fully charged, it's kind of like having a generator. Is that right? So you can actually plug into your car to power things if you need to.
Correct. And actually that power is gonna go to your neighbor. It's not going to the company and coming back. And it's through a virtual power plant. And basically what that is so in the past, right, or even right now, the reason why they don't let you dump the energy into the grid is because they say it's unstable and it's, they don't know, and you're going to make it go. Well, it's 100-year-old technology that has not been upgraded. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. 70% of the energy gets lost in transmission from the coal plant to the person's door. And then they're telling you and I that if we, use, weather fitting our windows and all of that, that's going to help. Well, guess we do have to do that, but 70% is being lost before you even get it. So what we're talking about is local energy. It's like each place creates their energy, and it's not lost in transmission, and you don't plants, and you don't have, dirty energy.
So you're talking about a sophisticated, hyper-decentralized energy grid that uses the solar panel combination of your electric car to have the energy that you need, particularly during peak hours.
Correct. You could do it with anything. It doesn't matter. It could be a biodigester. It can be, a pellet generator, whatever you have. And in permaculture, we talk that you have the resources and the needs. And when you have resources, that's what you use. And so it depends, like one of the biggest pollutants is agriculture, because people burn the stuff they can't use. Well, imagine if you put, compress it into a log and use it in a really clean, combustion to do heat, so it's really.
And just compost it, or use it as mulch. This was like working in Nicaragua. It's like people would like rake up all of their mulch, all of their leaves and their plastic bags, and they just burn it all. And then they were using chemical fertilizers on their, super dry crops rather than, so teaching people how to do mulch was another piece of that. Okay, so let's go into the hemp carbon credits world. So one of the things I worked on some years ago was looking at transitioning out of sugarcane, like a monoculture, chemically intensive sugarcane, where they were ripening the cane with glyphosate. And the sugarcane industry collapsed in Hawaii. And we had this moment where we had this opportunity of looking at how to transition that acreage into a regenerative agriculture. Same thing you were talking about earlier. Our county council didn't have the vocabulary of regenerative agriculture or permaculture. So the study that we did, the Malama Aina report, was a part of the goal of that report was just to language up the people in our county to understand these concepts. We were looking at using the ratoon, the secondary crop of sugarcane, as a fodder crop in rotational grazing while we were starting a successional strategy of agroforestry, particularly buffering the watersheds. And in that equation, the sugarcane itself is sequestering carbon, right? And anything that you're going to alley crop down those annual corridors, right, in between the tree crops, all of that is sequestering carbon. And in the tropics and the subtropics, that's 2 or 3 crops of those a year. That's a stunning amount of carbon sequestration. But concurrently, if you have the agroforestry coming up, which is your long-term overstory strategy, all those trees are sequestering carbon. And so how do we look at integrating hemp into that rotational grazing system?
So for hemp, you can have many uses, right? Food, if you're gonna eat the hemp parts, which are high in protein and only omega acids, then there's the crop that would be for CBD, which you're using. It's actually, we don't even call it a strain anymore because that's a misnomer. That's for bacteria. It's actually a chemovar because we're using the chemistry, the chemicals inside of the flower. So that's another crop. And then the crop of hemp for fiber or for biogas, that would be broad acre permaculture. That's like soy or wheat. It would be in that realm. Okay. So what we are saying is you can have a small specialty crop for the CBD, that if you own all the means of production, then you can make enough money to be able to grow food. Because the problem is that growing food is not giving enough money to people that are growing it. So the CBD is like a bolster crop, right? Now, if you want to use the fiber, right, then we need to figure out a way that the farmer can cash in, not the decorticating plant. And that's still a few years. We're doing that research. And if you're going to use it for biofuel, then that is, hundreds of acres. So I would say that for Hawaii, my father, who was a very intelligent man, I told him I want to live in Hawaii, and I want to have, 2 or 3 people that I work with, and we want to make $200,000 a year. And he was like, and then he said, maybe grapes, maybe no, because he had done lemongrass, the essential oil of lemongrass, and he goes, well, maybe grapes because they're kind of like Mediterranean. He was like thinking of like the different things, and he said, it's like it has to be a small niche market. And you guys, I mean, in Hawaii, you have so many tourists. If you were able to sell them a yo-yo for $1, all those people going through there, it would make an industry. So what would it be? Would it be, something made out of a fiber that hemp could do? Would it be a food? Would it be a medicine? It would have to be a specialty crop. And I would.
So there's a definitely an angle of boutique cannabis products, right? But what we're talking about here is like there's several ways that you can make money off the hemp crop. Can we get carbon sequestration, carbon credits money for growing hemp?
Yes.
Who is giving that out? Like how do we do that?
I don't know. I'd have to ask Bill how that's happening. I mean, it's basically it's all trickling down, but the legislature's there and the money is there.
Who meets the rubric for the requirements to actually get the carbon credits downloaded? The rules generally are you have to have 250 acres, you have to own the land, right? And so there's particular rules, but it seems really smart to me to be able to look at it from the agroforestry succession with the annuals in between that have a high carbon sequestration rating, like a hemp.
Hmm. Hmm. I think that in a way, what we did in the field is we used ground cover that was a perennial, and so, I mean, when you're growing things like that, right, you don't want the big plants to create shade, so then the other ones don't thrive. And so we had, it was oh boy, now I'm not going to remember the name, but it came up naturally, and then we realized that we could mow it and it would stay really short, and so it would be using perennial cover crops between the hemp is what we used, and it worked great.
Right.
We used less water. We actually had an event in the 17th of September of 2 years ago. We had a snow storm that put down it rained for 2 days, and then it turned into sleet, and then it turned into snow, and our entire field of 26,000 plants fell over, and the roots were up in the air, the plants were down, and I actually went to bed for 2 days, didn't up, because I was like, I can't see that devastation. It turned out that hemp is a weed, in terms of evolution, it's way the hell down there. It doesn't need any, I mean, you're working with fruit trees, which are really difficult. How do you get them? No, it's a weed. And so we went there and we got bamboo sticks and we just pushed them back over because the soil was so wet that the weight of the snow lifted the entire root ball up, and we just pushed it back in and put it up. We lost 6 plants out of 20,000. It was just like, so it's a weed, and it's resilient, it's strong, it's, you don't need to have that much care. In fact, a characteristic of a pioneer species in the weed is that it can grow in really bad soil, denaturalized. It doesn't, I mean, it can do it. So it's not that hard to grow. It's just once you grow it, what do you make from it?
I mean, it seems like when somebody said to me recently that cannabis is still kind of in the Wild West phase of its, everybody's up to all kinds of stuff trying to figure out how to do it. And at this juncture where we have the clones that we want, where we have the THC or the CBD content percentages that we want, where the market is clearly, there's a high demand for stuff, and we can get farmers earning a dignified living wage farming, the combination of all of that, also doing carbon smart carbon farming at the same time. I mean, that whole carbon farming series that Darren Doherty did some years ago, I thought that was a brilliant series, and I'd love to be able to weave cannabis into that matrix. So how do we monetize the cannabis industry and take the money from wherever we can get it? And if the carbon, credits part of it is there, that would be a huge boon to the industry, I think.
Indeed.
Farmers.
Yeah. No, indeed. And you're bringing up Darren Doherty, which is really interesting because I asked, that was his name, the Carbon Economy series was his name. And I asked him if I could revive it. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm changing it. And it was that series in Santa Barbara where I saw Joel Salatin, and I saw Dr. Elaine Ingham, and I saw Alan Savory. And it was like, all these people that were doing exactly what I felt had to happen for us to stabilize climate, which was to grow more things and have more things doing photosynthesis so that we could offset the amount of carbon that we've created. So I asked Darren if I could use his name for my nonprofit, and he gave it to me because I feel that all these movements they all dovetail into each other and create a more sustainable future. So it's like, and I always tell people, grow anything, grow everything, grow whatever you can. It's like that's where we need to go. When Manila gave 10 meters, 10 square meters to every citizen and said, you need to plant this and you need to eat from it. I mean, like, period of 1 or 2 years, the people were subsidizing their, 60% of their food with what they were growing in their 10 square meters, and I think all of us need to do that on some level. And then, how do we organize? And I actually like the concept of organizing by watersheds, so it's like this watershed grows these things, this watershed grows this other thing, and then we exchange between there, and it's, I
That's
mean,
yeah, yeah, and that's certainly the Hawaiian pattern. That's the pattern literacy of here for 1,000 years. It's all done by watershed, from the top of the mountain, down to the ocean.
brilliant, how they give people the entire segment, as opposed to just being around the rivers and this and that, learning how to take care of all of that, and including, taking care of those trees way the heck up there are going to help us not erode.
Well, and it's not so much learning it. It's more about recognizing that the indigenous knowledge already knew how to do it well, and with generational succession that was abundant. And of course, the first thing the colonists do is come cut all the trees down at the top of the watershed and then take it from there. They just rape the land all the way down. And so, here we are looking at basically climate instability the globe over, and it's time to let the indigenous people lead. Like, we have a lot to learn, but I think it's also admitting, and not just admitting, it's embracing the existing knowledge that's there of land management for enduring human systems. There's not that many of them. And like you said earlier, a lot of humans, they come in, they settle, they destroy the land, and then they move on. And, at 8 billion people, you can't really do that. So how do you have enduring systems in a place that are hyperlocal, that are focused on a watershed? And also, how do we monetize that? How do we create an economy around that? So that's that whole, carbon economy concept, right? And we're looking, the global part of it is that we're wanting to glean the financial resources to support our projects, but really out the other side of that, we're looking at a much more just resilient local systems overall.
Indeed. And it's almost taking a few steps back to take a look at what's there and what's worked in the past, and it's almost, I'm an athlete, so I like to use the example of, like, when you're going to do a basketball layup, you actually back up, and then you take a running start, and then you go pump, and then you do the layup. You can't do a layup if you're right underneath the basket. And so I think that as a culture, we need to step back and go, wait a minute, it's like, yes, the green revolution with high inputs and petroleum and tilling and all these chemicals, which, as you know, are a byproduct of war, because the nitrates and phosphates, the mountains of it, were there after they made munitions. And then, so we have the same companies that are creating war on one side and then selling us fertilizers on the other. And it's like, this is not the way it was done 70 years ago or 100 years ago. This is not the way we got here. And it's already failed everywhere that we've taken it, to Africa, to South America. Those things have failed. And I'm from Venezuela, where we're looking at the United States like, what are they doing? Oh, this. Okay, well, we want to do it because it's from the USA, so it's great. So they send you the pesticide, and instead of being able to read that it's only 1 teaspoon for every 5 gallons, you go, well, 3 teaspoons is more. it's better because it's more and it's better. And actually, what's happening to us is like all the DDT that we didn't sell in the United States, they sent it to Central and South America, and we're getting it in our vegetables. It's like we're poisoning ourselves by selling the junk to the countries around.
We need new binoculars that show what's really going on up here. This is the part of the paradigm shift for everybody. I'm really fascinated to hear how your small organization has done so much research. Really, I mean, for you, it probably feels like years and years, but it's really a short amount of time to get to a highly marketable product that is really beneficial to your community, right? And so you guys are on the cusp of expanding that in your CBD business. You're also probably getting traction with your farmers who originally were like, forget it, we don't want to talk to you. They probably now are like, well, wait a minute, maybe we could make $100,000. So have you started to find farmers who want to work with you at this stage?
Yes. Actually, we have they told us 4 years ago, you saved our family farm. They had 3 kids and they wanted to give them raw milk. And there was nobody who had raw milk. So they were both in corporate America. They decided to do farming and they had a herd and they were selling raw milk and they were going under. And one of them went back to corporate America. The other one tried hemp. And 3 years ago, they said, you saved our family farm because the extra income with the hemp saved our farm. Now, since then, almost every farmer that got started went belly up because they planted too much, they couldn't extract it, and they've been burnt. So now what we usually do is we offer them 5,000 clones that it's 2,500 per acre, so 2 acres. We give them the clones, we teach them how to grow it, and then when they grow it, they give us back the biomass, we make it into oil, and we switch out. We pay them half in cash and half in oil so they can sell it too. And so now what we see is that a farmer will do it if we pay them before. And that's what we want to do, pay them half up front so that they can have the money to do the planting and irrigation and everything. And then when they give us the biomass, then we pay them again. So we're working really, really hard to get our name out there and have more sales so that we can support those farmers. And now we're known in Colorado, so would grow for us as soon as we have that demand. So we're looking forward to setting that up here in the next couple of years as we get more cash flow and can give them the money, half of the money up front.
Great. Okay, that sounds like a really good model. Thanks so much for taking your time today to tell us about your projects. I'm really, really happy that your project is successful, that you guys have endured through this, the slog of getting to where you are. It sounds like you're right on the cusp of some really big stuff with your organization.
Well, thank you. I look forward to speaking again.
Okay, great. Well, we'll talk to you soon. This is Jenny Pell, the Growers Podcast. We'll see you next time.